Welcome back to Sonic Adventure. We're kicking things off with Sonic's second action stage, the Windy Valley. I'm going to take this time to talk about a couple things that I forgot to talk about during the last part. One of them was the character select options. There was Game, which was pretty much, it's taking you to the campaign for that character. There's Cancel, which is self-explanatory. You just go back and pick a different character. Although we didn't have much of an option for other characters at the beginning. And there's Instruction. I would recommend looking at that, because this game, while it is, pretty faithful to the Genesis games, you might not know about certain abilities that characters have. Especially in the case of Big the Cat, where his gameplay is very, very different from everyone else's. You might not know exactly what to do with him at first, so look at the instructions. Honestly, this is very bad of me. I'm gonna say right now what I'm about to say, not anything in the gameplay. The game doesn't tell you in gameplay where, or not where, but how to do certain moves. And I think that's okay. You don't have to, get told by the game, at least by the gameplay. Like, it doesn't have to show you via the level progression. It can just tell you in an optional thing, and I'm fine with that. I am not fine with people complaining about how a game works when they don't know because they decided to skip the instructions bit. You probably know who I'm talking about if you watch other people's Let's Plays, especially ones of Sonic Adventure. Just putting that out there now. The other thing that I neglected to talk about was that a lot of times in this game, well, thank you, camera, a lot of times in this game you're going to be moving around out of your control. Pretty much, Sonic will be on autopilot for a bit, like in the first level where you were being chased by that whale. There were a bunch of speed panels, and you had no control over where Sonic was gonna go. You just watched as the killer whale kind of destroyed the platform behind you, and Sonic ran away from it. In this stage, there's also some examples of that. Not here, where I'm very badly running into the walls left and right, but there's these certain sections where there's leaves flying about in the air. If you run up to them, you'll basically be taken on an invisible trail, like right here, following those leaves. If you jump at all during that section, you're flying out of the trail and dying, so don't. It'll take you on its own, so just let it take you. Grabbing that second emerald, though, finishes the stage, So now we get to move on. The game also keeps track of your rings for something that I'm going to be showing off a bit later. Actually, I'm going to be showing it off in this part, I believe. So, look forward to that.
The train headed for Station Square will be
Now that we've finished that stage, usually whenever you hear the train conductor, or whoever it is, say that the train is running, you probably have to go back to Station Square. There's also that red Navi thing that is spoiler, so I'm not going to talk about it right now, even though this is a decade-old game, as I said. Well, more than a decade old. But there's that red fairy that will tell you certain things, like go to Station Square or do a specific thing, depending on the context. Pretty helpful if you don't know where you're going. I do. I'm just going to show it off a couple times here. Probably wouldn't have known that bit, though, your first time playing through the game. And it's fine to talk to her. There's no penalty, so just use it if you need to. In these sewers, though, we get something else that's in the hub world. A certain other collectible. Upgrades to your characters. Sonic here gets the Lightspeed shoes. This pretty much becomes a mainstay in other games. Not really the upgrade system, but being able to do a Lightspeed dash. It's explaining it to you right now. If you hold down the action button, which is what I'm going to call it because there's a bunch of different, systems that this game is for. If you hold it down, you'll charge up the spin dash. After about 5 or so seconds, Sonic will say ready, and if you let go of the button, he will follow the trail of rings and pretty much fly up to wherever it ends. In other games, they kind of streamline it by making it just pressing the action button rather than pressing the action button for a little while, like holding it and then letting go. But that also provides a kind of conundrum where you can't really have everything mapped to one button as the other games do, because that's a bit of a complication, but they do it anyway. I'm showing off something here that's completely optional, and I screwed up. There's this golden egg here in this jewelry store that you appear in after getting out of the sewers. And you can take it if you take this egg-shaped stone and put it on the pedestal instead. It'll weigh it down, and thus you can get out. If the pedestal isn't weighed down, then there's some bars that appear that prevent you from leaving the area. This egg is very special. There's only one of it in the game, or at least per file. And they're for something that I'm only going to be showing off this once, actually. Kind of. I am going to show off different versions of this area that I'm going to, but I'm just going to be going to this version of that area once, if that makes any sense. We're going into the Chow world, or Chow Garden to give it its proper name, where these adorable little creatures called Chows reside. If you pick up the egg with the action button and then shake it around a bit by holding the action button after you pick it up and then moving the control stick, the egg will hatch and a Chow will come out. Sometimes the Chow's faces come up really weird, and I honestly did not want that kind of face for my Chow. I wanted more happy face, but whatever. I will love it anyway because it's made of gold. Chows are basically little creatures that you can help grow by giving them different attributes. You can upgrade them in certain aspects, such as making them faster, making them swim better, making them able to fly, things like that. And camera. Okay. Right now what I'm attempting to get is another upgrade for Sonic. Basically what you have to do is you have to create a trail of rings and then press the other button to open up this elevator at the end of that trail of rings. Once you've done so properly, you can get into the elevator and obtain the crystal ring. It is a very useful item because when you're charging up the Lightspeed Dash, it basically like halves the time. So you don't have to charge up for as long, which means less waiting, which everyone knows is a good thing because waiting sucks. Even though I've said before that I'm fine with it. In order to get into the casino level, which is pretty much a mainstay in every Sonic game, you have to hit a switch and then perform a Lightspeed Dash because that switch revealed some rings. And look at that, that was so fast now. It's such a convenient item to have. We are in Casinopolis, not Casinoopolis as a certain Pink Hedgehog says in a later game. But as with the casino tradition of Sonic goes, we have the pinball tradition of Sonic, where you basically control Sonic as he is a ball and play pinball with him. In this stage, your goal is to get a ton of rings, by which I mean 400 rings, and you can do so by playing these pinball games. If you match up the roulette in certain ways, you'll get a ton of rings out of it, but that's honestly not the fastest way to get rings. The fastest way to do it is to lose a bunch of rings, and, well, not lose, but don't gain any, is what I'm trying to say. If you decide that you want to quit the game early by basically letting yourself fall into the pit, and you have less than 100 rings, I believe, you'll be able to go to a special area, which we'll be getting to later, but this place is just delaying me. You can also tilt the board by basically holding a direction on the stick. They don't kick you out for it like they would do in other casinos. Not that I know, I've never been. Now that we're in this area, we can actually collect a lot more rings. There's a few lightspeed dash travel bits, and there's this huge fan, which is basically the central part of this stage. As it blows you up, there's a bunch of item boxes that you can collect, and a lot of them will have a bunch of rings in them. And I completely missed the one right there, so I'm going to get it again. There's also these tunnels that connect a few different fans. I think there's only 2 actually. So once you've exhausted the previous area, you could, you know, get all the rings in there and then decide to go to the next fan. But that's honestly not very engaging, I guess I'll say. So I'll just head on to the next area. This one is where you can really rack up the ring prizes. You can get pretty much all of the rings that you need to for the stage in this one area. After this though, there's a bunch of spiked balls, and they will hurt you, and when Sonic drops his rings, he usually doesn't drop all 245 that I've collected right now. Only about 30 appear, but your ring count is reduced to 0, so all that work you just did probably went to waste. Luckily, they give you an invincibility power-up and a shield here. Invincibility doing exactly what it sounds like it should do. It makes you invincible. You can plow through enemies and not take any damage. The shield basically enabling you to take a free hit without losing any rings, which is very useful. There's also these showers in the bathroom that pretty much don't have a purpose. At least I don't think they have a purpose. I don't know what it is if they do. But if you stand in them, Sonic will wash his quills. Pretty interesting, I suppose. It doesn't really do anything but waste time, but I wanted to show it off because, I don't know, I think it's pretty cool. If you bump into those things, I don't know what to call them, you'll make some rings pop out of them, but only a few appear, like maybe 10 at most per thing, so it's not really useful for getting a lot of them. And for some reason the rings turn into these tokens with Sonic's face on them when they get pulled out of you. But that's why you want to get 400 rings in this area, because the only way to get to that Chaos Emerald up there is to basically collect a bunch of rings, turn them all into tokens, and then make a huge mountain out of those tokens and follow it up to the Chaos Emerald. You can't even like do any cool spin dash tricks, which I really like to do in this game. The physics is pretty fun to play around with. There's no way to get up there until you have 400 rings because there's an invisible wall. This table, I guess you'd call it pinball table, yeah. It has a different mechanic to it. It still plays like pinball, of course, but rather than having a roulette, you have cards, and those cards can be matched just like in poker, like 1 pair, 3 of a kind, 4 of a kind, full house, things like that. As you collect more cards, you'll get more rings. This is also based off of another Sonic team creation called Knights. Knights is this game where you play as Knights, the character that's on the table, and you kind of fly around. You collect these ideas, I think they're called, which are basically like spheres representing different will powers or something like that. I haven't actually played Knights, but I have watched Let's Plays of it, thus I am an expert on the topic. When it comes to this section of the level, like this weird nightmare-y section, you can get shot out and basically go through different night levels, or Knights levels. I think this is the final one from the first game. There are multiple games, like one on the Saturn, maybe. I didn't own Sega consoles when I was little, okay? If you fall out in this area, though, instead of losing a ball, you go through the first level of Nights into Dreams. A pretty neat callback for Nights fans, but I'm not a Knights fan, so it's not as neat for me. Rather than me gushing over it, I'm just kind of, let it end. The sad thing is that I actually kind of go into that nightmare area again, which also means that I go and fail on purpose and go through the first level again. Kinda sucks. But you get to enjoy the Knight's music, which is pretty nice. I kind of prefer other songs in the soundtrack though. It's not bad, it's just not as good. And pretty trippy, despite the very premature, I guess you'd call it, graphics. Very outdated, I suppose. Now that we have collected all of these rings, we can bring them to this area and have them shaken out of us and turned into tokens, and finally get that other emerald. I hope nobody takes this emerald for us as we're leaving this place. Hopefully not with any sort of sleep-inducing gas or anything like that. I apologize, I just spoiled the next cutscene. Or I didn't. The next cutscene, okay? First off, they show you that there is a blue stone that appears. It's pretty much the ice key that lets you get access to the ice level. Eggman just came in out of nowhere. He didn't really bump into us, he just kind of drove into us. And he stole one of our emeralds. That is not how he said Eggman. I don't want to get into this for too long, but I do wonder how blind people read the lines. Like if they're said the same way as the characters say them. Not in terms of like the voice, of course, but like the inflections and the accents.
His 2 to R1, and that's not good. Come on, Sonic, we need to get busy.
Here's a reference. I think this is only in Sonic Adventure DX, along with the Knights casino thing. I don't think that was in the original Sonic Adventure. But Cream, the rabbit, appears. She's a character who debuted in the Sonic Advance series, which were these games made by Dimps on the Game Boy Advance. I think she was in Sonic Adventure 2. I honestly don't have a lot of experience with the Dimps games, and Sonic is not in that cart. Back at the Mystic Ruins, some stone decided to destroy itself. So now we pretty much have to take this to where it needs to go, just like with the Wind Key. There are also a lot of archaeologists around that you can talk to, along with hints from the fairy. I was very much about to say the name of the fairy. I wonder what the trope of the next level is going to be. Well, you won't be able to know until next time.